Today we're going to learn how to draw an eye. A few things to remember when you're drawing an eye. Number 1, don't create a football. Number 2, be careful not to make your eye look scary. Number 3, you don't want it to look like your eye is rolling. And number 4, do not draw SpongeBob eyelashes. Begin by outlining the overall shape of your eye. I like to refer to this shape as a deflated lemon. It sounds strange, I know, but this kind of gives you the idea of your tear duct and where it should be positioned. Next, we're going to outline our iris, pupil, and an area for a highlight. So the highlight might change depending on your reference. If your reference has more highlights than just a little circle, that's fine. Make sure that you draw those. We're also going to add a little line for where our eyelid is. Next, we're going to begin shading the inside of our eye. So I always like to start with the darkest areas when I'm doing any sort of shading, because that way if I add too much graphite, it's a little bit easier to transition. So the tops of our iris and pupil are going to be a little bit darker than the rest because of the cast shadow that is created from our eyelid. As you shade the inside of your eye, make sure that you're adding layers. You don't want to push too hard in the beginning because then again you're going to take away the texture of your paper, just like we talked about in our value practice. When you take away the texture of your paper, it's a lot harder to add graphite onto it. So start light, then continue to add shading as you go. As you notice, I'm shading in somewhat of a textured sense. I'm using these little lines that are going towards the pupil within my eye. Then I'm going to blend, or you could say smudge, my graphite in. Now I'm using a Q-tip because this is something that we all have usually at our house. So if you have a blending stump, you're welcome to use that. A paintbrush is a wonderful blending tool, or you could just roll up a piece of paper towel. Again, always go back and add layers. I will continue to do that throughout this whole video. Next, we're going to start shading around our eye. Remember that we are not made up of bold outlines. So when you're drawing any sort of facial feature, or if you're going to draw a full portrait, you never want to leave the surrounding areas completely white. Rather, you're going to add that value scale, those tones, to the surrounding portions of your image. As you can see, it's darker towards the crease for my eyelid, and then it gradually gets lighter as it goes towards the eye. This will keep us away from bold outlines. Again, in real life, we're not made of bold outlines, so we shouldn't have bold outlines around a somewhat realistic drawing. When you are blending with your blender, whether that be a blending stump or a Q-tip or a paintbrush, whatever it is, same thing applies as with your pencil. Do not push too hard. As you can see, I am adding graphite to the white of my eye as well. Just because it looks white doesn't mean it wouldn't have some shadows to it, because this is still supposed to be a somewhat three-dimensional drawing. So we're going to have those form shadows on all parts of our image, on all parts of our drawing. Be careful not to make everything gray. You do want to be aware of the highlights that you're going to add. I like to use just a regular pencil eraser to add my highlights to some simple sketch drawings. Next is our eyelashes. Now with our eyelashes, these should be a very loose, natural curve. So I'm going to identify just a few to start before I really fill this in with any more eyelashes. Again, we don't want what I call SpongeBob eyelashes. These curve starting from the bottom of your top eyelid, and then they curve up. If you start at the bottom and then kind of pull away, this is going to create that natural texture of like a hair, because it almost gives a finer point at the end because we've applied more pressure when we begin our eyelashes. So start at the bottom, pull away, and don't be afraid to go more than one direction. So if you notice, I'm curving kind of on both sides. I'm not just curving in one direction. Next, I'm going to add a few shadows that are in my eye that are cast down from my eyelashes. Always going back and adding a few touch-ups through your drawing process. Contrast is really important when you're adding any sort of shading to your drawings. Next are our bottom eyelashes. So these are obviously a lot smaller. Same thing applies though. We're starting at the eyelid, and this time we're going down with our curved mark rather than up. Again, add any touch-up marks to finish out your eye. Although this is not a hyper-realistic eye, we still get a sense of realism here just because it has somewhat depth to it. We are only using one pencil. We're not changing pencils. We're not using any other medium. This is supposed to be very basic, what you have at home. Do your best, and remember that practice is what makes us better. Happy creating!